The crystal chandelier above table 12 cast fractured rainbows across the white linen tablecloth, each prism of light trembling with the vibrations of expensive laughter. Marina Delgado balanced 4 plates along her left arm: seared duck breast, truffle risotto, Chilean sea bass, and the chef's special Wellington, moving through the dining room of Constellation with the practiced grace of someone who had learned to make herself invisible while carrying visible luxury. The restaurant hummed with the particular frequency of wealth, the soft clink of silverware against bone china, the rustle of designer fabric, the murmur of conversations where business deals were disguised as dinner parties. She had been a waitress here for 3 years, ever since the teaching position she'd been promised at Riverside Academy fell through due to budget restructuring. That was the polite term they'd used. The reality was simpler. The superintendent's nephew needed a job, and family connections beat qualifications. So she traded lesson plans for order tickets, trading shaping young minds for remembering who wanted their steak medium rare versus medium well. Her mother's voice still echoed in her head during particularly difficult shifts. "Mija, pride doesn't pay the rent. A job is a job." If you've been enjoying this story so far, it only takes a second to like this video and subscribe to more compelling tales like this one. Table 12 was already proving to be a challenge. Victoria Ashford had arrived 20 minutes ago in a cloud of Chanel No. 5 and entitlement. Her blonde hair swept into an architectural updo that probably cost more than Marina's monthly grocery budget. The woman wore a cream Dior suit that hung perfectly on her angular frame, and diamonds glinted at her ears, wrists, and throat. Not the delicate kind that whispered wealth, but the aggressive kind that shouted it. "Finally," Victoria said as Marina approached, not bothering to look up from her phone. "We've been sitting here for hours." Marina kept her expression neutral. It had been 7 minutes since they'd ordered. "Your entrees, ladies. Duck breast for you, ma'am." She placed the plate before a brunette with too much filler. "Truffle risotto, here, sea bass, and the Wellington for Mrs. Ashford." Victoria's eyes, ice-chip blue and just as cold, finally lifted to meet Marina's. There was something predatory in that gaze, something that reminded Marina of the barn cats that used to play with mice before killing them. "This is wrong." Marina's heart sank. "I'm sorry?" "I ordered the Wellington medium rare. This is practically leather." Victoria poked at the perfectly cooked beef with her fork as if it were roadkill. The meat was, in fact, exactly as she'd ordered it, medium rare with a warm pink center. Marina had double-checked with Chef Raymond herself. "I can have the kitchen. Do you have any idea who I am?" Victoria's voice rose just enough to draw attention from neighboring tables. "My husband is Marcus Ashford. Ashford Industries? Perhaps you've heard of it in whatever public school educated you." The other women tittered, a sound like wind chimes made of ice. Marina's fingers tightened imperceptibly on her serving tray. She had indeed heard of Ashford Industries. Everyone in the city had. They owned half the commercial real estate downtown, had their name on the children's wing at Mercy Hospital, sponsored the annual charity gala that raised millions for various causes. Marcus Ashford's face appeared regularly in the business section of the Herald, usually accompanied by words like visionary and philanthropist. "I apologize for any confusion, Mrs. Ashford," Marina said, her voice steady despite the heat rising in her cheeks. "I'd be happy to have Chef Raymond prepare a new Wellington exactly to your specifications." "Oh, how generous of you." Victoria leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs with deliberate slowness. "Tell me, dear, what's your name?" "Marina." "Marina." Victoria rolled the name around in her mouth like a wine she was about to spit out. "That's ethnic, isn't it? Where are you from?" "I was born in San Miguel, but I've lived here since I was 6. And what brings someone like you to work at Constellation? I imagine the tips are quite good, especially when you—" Victoria's eyes traveled deliberately down Marina's uniform, make an effort to be accommodating. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Marina felt something cold settle in her stomach, but she maintained her composure. Years of dealing with difficult customers had taught her the art of emotional compartmentalization. "I'll get you a new Wellington right away, Mrs. Ashford." As Marina turned to leave, Victoria's voice followed her. "And do try to hurry, dear. Unlike you, some of us have important places to be. Though I suppose for someone in your position, this is as high as you'll ever rise." The women at the table erupted in laughter. Not genuine amusement, but the performative kind designed to establish hierarchy. In the kitchen, Chef Raymond looked up from where he was plating a dessert. He was a rotund man with kind eyes and hands that create art from butter and flame. Problem? Table 12 wants the Wellington redone, says it's overcooked. Raymond's eyebrows rose. That was perfect medium rare. I cut it myself. I know. Just, can you make another? Exactly the same. Victoria Ashford?
Marina nodded. Raymond sighed, wiping his hands on his apron. That woman could find fault with ambrosia. Last month she sent back champagne because the bubbles were too aggressive. Marcus must be a saint to put up with her. The name sparked something in Marina's memory. Marcus Ashford. She'd actually seen him once, about 6 months ago, when he dined alone at table 7. He'd been quiet, polite, had left a generous tip and thanked her by name after asking for it. Nothing like the monster Victoria was describing through her demands and condescension. But then again, Marina had learned that people often wore different faces for different audiences. She returned to the dining room with the new Wellington 15 minutes later. The restaurant was reaching peak dinner hour now. Every table occupied, the air thick with mingled conversations and the scent of expensive cuisine. As Marina approached table 12, she noticed Victoria was now on her phone, speaking loudly enough for several nearby tables to hear. "No, Mother, I told you. The gala is black tie, not creative black tie. There is a difference. We can't have people showing up looking like they're attending some bohemian art show." She glanced up as Marina arrived, waving her hand dismissively. "Hold on, Mother. The help has finally returned." Marina set the plate down with careful precision. "Your Wellington, Mrs. Ashford. Medium rare as requested." Victoria didn't even look at the food. "Tell me, Marina, you do understand what medium rare means, don't you? Or is that concept too advanced for your educational background?" "Victoria." The voice came from behind Marina, masculine and carrying a note of warning. "That's enough." Marina turned to find a man standing 3 feet away, and she recognized him immediately. Marcus Ashford was taller than she remembered, perhaps 6'2", with dark hair graying at the temples and eyes the color of aged whiskey. He wore a charcoal suit that was somehow both impeccably tailored and slightly rumpled, as if he'd been wearing it too long. There was something weary in his expression, something that suggested a man carrying weight that didn't show on any scale. Victoria's face transformed instantly, the cruelty smoothing into a practiced smile. "Darling, I didn't expect you until 8. We're just having a girls' dinner before the Sanderson fundraiser." She gestured to the empty chair at the table. "Join us." But Marcus wasn't looking at his wife. His eyes were on Marina, and in them she saw something unexpected, recognition, and perhaps regret. "I apologize for my wife's behavior. It was inappropriate and uncalled for." The dining room had grown quieter. Nearby tables were no longer pretending not to listen. Victoria's smile had frozen on her face like a crack in porcelain. "Marcus, don't be ridiculous. I was simply ensuring proper service. By insulting the staff? By making racist implications?" His voice was still quiet, but there was steel beneath the silk. "Do you think I don't hear these stories, Victoria? Do you think the staff don't talk?" Marina felt caught in the spotlight she hadn't asked for. "Mr. Ashford, it's really fine." "It's not fine." He turned back to her and he saw genuine distress in his features. "Ms. Delgado, it is Ms. Delgado, isn't it? I remember you from the last time I was here. You recommended the bouillabaisse." The fact that he remembered sent a small shock through her system. "Yes, sir. I want you to know that this behavior doesn't represent my values or the values of my company, and I want you to know something else." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. "Victoria, I've been meaning to give these to you all week, but the time never seemed right. I suppose there's no perfect moment for this." Victoria's face had gone pale beneath her professional makeup. "Darling, what are you—" "Divorce papers." He set the envelope on the table beside the twice-cooked Wellington. "I'm done. With the cruelty, the affairs you think I don't know about, the way you treat people you consider beneath you. I've been documenting everything for 6 months. The prenup you signed is airtight, and your infidelity voids any claim to my assets beyond the initial settlement we agreed to." The silence that fell over the restaurant was absolute. Even the kitchen noise seemed to have stopped. Marina stood frozen, still holding her empty serving tray, feeling as though she'd stumbled into someone else's private earthquake. Victoria's mouth opened and closed like a fish on land. When she finally found words, they came out strangled. "You can't. Not here. Marcus, people are watching."
Yes, people are watching. Just like they watched you humiliate someone whose only crime was serving you dinner. Just like they've watched you treat this city like your personal kingdom for 5 years. Marcus looked tired, as though the words were costing him something vital. "The car will take you to your mother's. Your things are already there. The penthouse locks have been changed, and before you threaten legal action, I'd remind you that Jacob Chan is no longer your attorney. He's mine, and he has quite an interesting file compiled." One of Victoria's friends, the brunette with too much filler, tentatively touched her arm. "Victoria, maybe we should—" Victoria shook her off, standing so abruptly her chair skittered backward. Her face had gone from pale to crimson, blotchy with rage and humiliation. "This is about her, isn't it?" She jabbed a manicured finger toward Marina. "Some cheap little waitress batting her eyelashes, and you're having your midlife crisis." "This has nothing to do with Miss Delgado," Marcus said firmly. "This is about who you are, Victoria, who you've always been beneath the charity galas and the social pages. I just finally stopped making excuses for it." Victoria snatched the envelope from the table, her hands shaking. For a moment, Marina thought she might tear it up, might throw it in Marcus's face. Instead, she turned that venomous gaze to Marina. "This is your fault. Women like you, always trying to climb your way up, destroying families." "Miss Delgado did nothing wrong," Marcus interrupted. "And I'd advise you to stop talking before you say something that ends up in the divorce proceedings as evidence of your character." Victoria's mouth snapped shut. She grabbed her purse, a Birkin that cost more than Marina's car, and swept toward the exit, her friends scrambling to follow. At the door, she turned back one final time. "You'll regret this, Marcus. I'll make sure of it." Then she was gone, the door closing behind her with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than any slam. The restaurant remained silent for another 3 heartbeats before the murmur of conversation gradually resumed, this time with an electric undercurrent of gossip that would fuel social circles for weeks. Marina stood rooted to the spot, her mind trying to process what had just happened. She'd been humiliated, defended, and made a witness to the dissolution of a marriage all in the span of 15 minutes. Marcus turned to her, and she saw exhaustion etched in every line of his face. "Miss Delgado, I am profoundly sorry you were dragged into this." Marina's voice came out rough. She cleared her throat. "Sir, you didn't have to do that. I'm used to difficult customers." "That's exactly the problem, isn't it? That people like you have to get used to being treated as less than human." He ran a hand through his hair, disrupting its perfect styling. "For what it's worth, I've been planning this for months. Tonight wasn't about you, it was about me finally finding the courage to stop enabling someone toxic. You just happened to be the catalyst." Gerard, the restaurant manager, appeared at Marina's elbow. He was a thin man with a pencil mustache, who normally exuded efficiency, but now looked decidedly flustered. "Mr. Ashford, sir, perhaps we could offer you a private table on the house." "That's generous, Gerard, but I think I've disrupted your evening enough." He pulled out his wallet and extracted several bills. Marina caught sight of $100 denominations. "This should cover Table 12's meal and an apology for the disturbance. And Gerard, give Miss Delgado whatever Victoria didn't tip. Something tells me it wouldn't have been adequate." "Sir, that's not necessary." "Perhaps not, but it's right." Marcus met her eyes again, and Marina saw something complicated there. Shame, determination, the raw vulnerability of someone who had just blown up his life in public. "I hope the rest of your evening is less eventful, Miss Delgado." Then he was gone too, leaving Marina standing in the middle of Constellation with $300 in her hand, and the feeling that the ground had shifted beneath her feet in ways she didn't yet understand. Gerard touched her shoulder gently. Take 5 minutes in the back, catch your breath. She nodded mutely and made her way toward the kitchen, aware of the eyes following her. In the staff break room, a cramped space with a battered sofa and a coffee maker that produced liquid marginally better than mud, she sank on the couch and stared at the money in her hands. $300. That was groceries for a month, or the gas bill, or the payment on the student loans that haunted her like persistent ghosts. But it felt heavy, weighted with implications she couldn't quite name. She thought about Victoria's face, crimson with rage and humiliation. She thought about Marcus's tired eyes and the envelope of divorce papers left beside an untouched Wellington. She thought about how a routine Wednesday evening had suddenly become a fracture point in multiple lives.
Her phone buzzed. A text from her younger sister, Isabella. "Mom's asking if you can pick up her prescription tomorrow. I have a double shift at the hospital." Marina texted back an affirmative and tucked the money into her apron pocket. Whatever had happened tonight, whatever complicated drama she'd stumbled into, her life would go on. She'd still have rent due on the 1st, still have her mother's medications to manage, still have the weight of an expensive education being used to remember dinner orders. The Ashfords' divorce would be gossip for the wealthy, a scandal that would ripple through country clubs and charity boards. But for Marina, it would be just another strange story from a long career and service work. Or so she thought. What Marina didn't know, couldn't know, was that tonight's confrontation was just the beginning. That Victoria Ashford was not a woman who accepted humiliation gracefully. That Marcus Ashford's public declaration had set in motion a series of events that would test Marina's resilience in ways she couldn't imagine. And that the $300 in her pocket would soon be the least complicated thing about her connection to the Ashford name. The kitchen door swung open. Chef Raymond poked his head in. "Table 7 needs their orders taken, sweetheart. You good?" Marina stood, smoothing her apron. "I'm good." But as she walked back into the dining room, past the table where divorce papers lay abandoned beside cold beef Wellington, past the whispers and curious glances, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered a warning she couldn't quite hear over the noise of normalcy returning. Some storms announce themselves with thunder. Others slip in quietly, disguised as justice. Marina's alarm went off at 5:47 a.m., 13 minutes before it needed to. She'd been awake for an hour already, staring at the ceiling of her studio apartment and replaying the previous night's events in her mind like a film stuck in a loop. The gray light of dawn filtered through her curtains, cheap ones from a discount store, not quite thick enough to block the city lights that never truly dimmed. She could hear Mrs. Chen upstairs already moving around, the creak of floorboards following the same pattern they did every morning, bedroom to bathroom to kitchen. The apartment was small, 450 square feet that contained her entire adult life. The Murphy bed took up most of the main space, flanked by a bookshelf she'd built herself from cinder blocks and reclaimed wood. Books filled every shelf, double-stacked and triple-stacked. Toni Morrison and Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Virginia Woolf and James Baldwin, the Norton anthology of poetry she'd used in graduate school, its spine cracked and pages dog-eared. On the wall above the bed hung her framed diploma. Sometimes she looked at it and felt pride. More often, she felt the sting of what might have been. She rolled out of bed and padded to the tiny kitchen. Really just a corner with a 2-burner stove, a miniature refrigerator, and a sink that dripped no matter how many times the superintendent
claimed to have fixed it. The coffee maker was already set up from the night before, grounds measured out precisely. Marina pressed the button and listened to it gurgle to life while she went through her morning routine. Bathroom, shower in the stall so small she had to be careful not to hit her elbows, hair twisted into a bun, minimal makeup. The face that looked back at her from the steam-fogged mirror was her mother's face. The same dark eyes, the same strong nose, the same stubborn chin that suggested determination, even in exhaustion. By 6:30 a.m., she was dressed in jeans and a sweater, her Constellation uniform folded in her bag for the evening shift. Thursday mornings were for her mother. She grabbed the coffee in a travel mug, collected her keys and phone, and headed out into the corridor. The building was old, one of those pre-war structures that developers kept threatening to buy and renovate, which really meant tear down and replace with luxury condos. The walls were thin enough that she knew her neighbors' routines as well as her own. The young couple in 3B who fought every Tuesday like clockwork, the elderly Mr. Patterson in 3A who watched game shows until midnight, and the college students in 3C who thought that smoking weed in the bathroom meant no one could smell it. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of the bakery 2 blocks over. Marina's car, a 2008 Honda Civic with 183,000 miles and a passenger door that stuck, started on the 3rd try, which was better than usual. She pulled into traffic, navigating the familiar route to her mother's apartment in the Garden District. The city transformed as she drove, from her working-class neighborhood with its bodegas and laundromats, through the commercial district where Constellation sat among other upscale establishments, and finally to the Garden District where her mother lived in a rent-controlled apartment she had occupied for 30 years.
Marina had long ago given up trying to hide things from her mother. Rosa possessed some maternal sixth sense that could detect trouble the way others detected smoke. As she scrambled eggs and heated tortillas, Marina recounted the previous night's events, editing only slightly, leaving out the full venom of Victoria's comments, downplaying the public spectacle of the divorce announcement. Rosa listened in silence until Marina finished. Then, "This Marcus Ashford, he defended you." "Yes." "In front of his wife, in front of everyone." "Yes." Rosa made a humming sound that Marina couldn't quite interpret. "What kind of man does this?" "I don't know, Mama. A decent one, I suppose. Or maybe just one who'd reached his limit. Men reach their limits every day. They don't usually make a public stand." Rosa accepted the plate Marina set before her. "You said he remembered you. Remembered your name." "From a previous visit. It doesn't mean anything." "No? Perhaps not. But people remember what matters to them, mija. We forget the rest." Rosa cut into her eggs with methodical precision. "This wife, Victoria, she will not forget either." A chill ran down Marina's spine. "What do you mean?" "Women like that. Women who have power through marriage, through money, through beauty. When you take it away, they become dangerous, like a cat backed into a corner." Rosa pointed her fork at Marina. "You be careful. I know you did nothing wrong, but in her mind, you are the reason her world ended." "That's not rational." "Since when do angry people think rationally?" Rosa's eyes, still sharp despite her 70 years, fixed on her daughter. "You have your father's tendency to believe the best in people, Marina. It's beautiful, but it's also dangerous. Not everyone deserves that faith." Marina thought about her father, Carlos Delgado, who had died when she was 16, his lungs destroyed by years working in the textile factory. He had been gentle, optimistic, had believed that hard work and goodness would be rewarded. He'd been wrong. The factory owners had fought his widow's benefits claim for 3 years before Rosa finally won a settlement that barely covered funeral costs.
They ate in companionable silence, the morning sunlight streaming through the kitchen window, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny spirits. After breakfast, Marina helped Rosa with her physical therapy exercises, careful stretches and movements designed to keep the arthritis from completely stealing her mobility. Then she organized her mother's medications, filling the weekly pill container, blood pressure medication, anti-inflammatories, and the expensive arthritis drug that would have been completely unaffordable without Isabella's hospital employee discount. "Isabella working again tonight?" Rosa asked as Marina prepared to leave. "Double shift. The hospital's short-staffed." "That girl works too hard. Both my daughters work too hard." Rosa's hand grasped Marina's wrist, her grip still surprisingly strong. "You were meant for more than carrying plates, mija. Your brilliant mind—" "Mama, we've talked about this. The teaching jobs aren't there. The market's flooded with PhDs and no positions. This is what I have. For now, but not forever." Rosa released her grip. "Your father had a saying, do you remember? El que espera, desespera." "I remember. But he also said, no por mucho madrugar, amanece más temprano. Just because you wake up early doesn't make the sun rise faster. What I mean, mija, is that opportunity is strange. Sometimes it comes from the strangest places, dressed in the strangest clothes. You keep your eyes open, yes?" Marina promised she would, and left, but Rosa's words followed her like a shadow. She had 2 hours before her shift at Constellation, so she drove to the public library where she'd been volunteering 2 mornings a week for the past year. The central library was a grand old building, all marble columns and high ceilings, the kind of structure that spoke to a time when public institutions were built to inspire awe. Inside, the familiar smell of books and furniture polish wrapped around her like a favorite sweater. "Marina!" Dorothy Chen, the head librarian, looked up from the circulation desk. She was a woman in her 60s, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and glasses that hung on a beaded chain around her neck. "Perfect timing. We just got a donation of books from an estate sale, and half of them need cataloging. I thought of you immediately." The next 2 hours passed in a peaceful blur. Marina sat in the back room, surrounded by boxes of books, examining each one, recording its details in the library's database, determining which would go into circulation and which would go to the annual sale. She found first editions mixed with book club selections, leather-bound classics alongside tattered paperbacks. Each book was a small world, a door to somewhere else, and handling them brought a sense of purpose that carrying plates never could. Among the donations, she found a signed first edition of Beloved, and her hands trembled slightly as she held it. This was the novel that had changed her life at 17, that had made her understand the power of literature to bear witness to history, to give voice to the voiceless. She'd written her dissertation on Morrison's use of magical realism as a tool for processing trauma. The dissertation was now collecting dust in the university archive, read by her committee and probably no one else. "That's a treasure," Dorothy said, appearing at her shoulder. "You know, Marina, I keep telling you, you should be doing this professionally. Have you considered getting your library science degree? With your PhD, it would only take—" "Another year I can't afford," Marina finished gently. "And more loans I can't take on." Dorothy sighed. "The world is stupidly inefficient at recognizing talent. But the offer stands. If you ever want to pursue it, I'll write recommendations that would make the admissions board weep." Marina thanked her and continued working. But the conversation lingered in her mind like smoke. How many versions of her life existed in potential? How many paths had closed while she wasn't looking? And how many remained open, visible only from the right angle? By noon, she was back in her car, heading toward Constellation. The lunch shift was quieter than dinner, mostly business meetings and the occasional leisurely meal. She changed in the staff bathroom, transforming from volunteer librarian back into professional waitress, black slacks, white button-down shirt, black apron tied precisely at her waist. In the mirror, she practiced the smile,
pleasant but not too familiar, attentive but not intrusive. The smile of someone whose job was to facilitate others' experiences while remaining essentially invisible. Gerard met her in the hallway. "Marina, I need to talk to you before your shift starts." Her stomach dropped. Is this about last night? In a way. He ushers her into his small office, barely larger than a closet, and closed the door. "I got 3 calls this morning. 3. From members of the Ashford family's legal team, from Victoria Ashford's personal attorney, and from some society reporter at the Herald wanting comments. I didn't say anything to anyone." "I know, and that's what I told all of them." Gerard leaned against his desk, arms crossed. "But here's the situation. Victoria Ashford is claiming you were having an affair with her husband, that you deliberately provoked her last night, that this is all some sort of scheme to break up a marriage." Marina's vision tunneled. "That's insane. I've served Marcus Ashford exactly twice. I've never even had a conversation with him beyond taking his order." "I believe you. The whole staff believes you. Hell, anyone with eyes who was here last night knows you were the victim in that scenario." Gerard rubbed his temples. "But Victoria has money, connections, and an appetite for revenge. Her attorney made some vague threats about a lawsuit, defamation, interference with a marriage, I don't know what all. It's almost certainly bullshit, but dealing with it costs time and money the restaurant doesn't want to spend." Marina felt cold creeping through her limbs. "Are you firing me?" "God, no. That would be exactly what she wants, and it would probably open us up to wrongful termination claims." Gerard's expression softened. "But Marina, I need to ask, are you okay to work? Because if Victoria starts a smear campaign, if this gets uglier, it's going to be uncomfortable for you. People will talk. They already are talking." Marina thought about her bank account, about her mother's medications, about Isabella's exhaustion from pulling double shifts to help cover their mother's expenses. "I'm okay to work." "All right, but Marina, document everything, every interaction, every conversation related to this. And if anyone harasses you, you tell me immediately." Gerard opened his desk drawer and pulled out a business card. "This is the restaurant's attorney. I've already briefed him on the situation. If you need legal advice, call him. The restaurant will cover the initial consultation." Marina took the card with numb fingers. An hour ago, she'd been contentedly cataloging books. Her biggest worry was whether to shelve historical fiction in the history or fiction section. Now she was being handed the number for an attorney because a wealthy woman had decided Marina was responsible for her failed marriage. The lunch shift passed in a fog. Marina went through the motions, taking orders, delivering food, clearing plates, all while wondering if there was truth to her mother's warning. Like a cat backed into a corner. At table 8, a young couple celebrating an anniversary needed wine pairings. Marina smiled and suggested the Pinot Noir, all while feeling the weight of invisible eyes watching her, judging her, creating narratives about her life that had no bearing on reality. During her break, she sat in the back alley behind the kitchen, the same place where staff came to grab 5 minutes apiece. The dumpster smell mingled with cigarette smoke from the line cook, Diego, who nodded at her sympathetically.
"Heard about your night," he said, exhaling a stream of smoke. "Rich people, man, they're a different species." "She's claiming I had an affair with her husband?" Diego's eyebrows shot up. "You mean that guy who defended you? That's cold." "It's also a complete lie." "Yeah, well, truth doesn't matter much when someone decides to destroy you." Diego stubbed out his cigarette. "My cousin worked for this wealthy family uptown. One day, the wife decided my cousin stole some jewelry. Turns out, the wife had just misplaced it, found it a week later in her gym bag. But by then, my cousin had been arrested, spent a night in jail, lost his job. The family apologized, but it didn't give him his reputation back." The story settled over Marina like a weight. Was that her future? Accusations that would follow her regardless of their truth?
She thought about every job application that would now need to navigate questions about gaps in employment, about reasons for leaving previous positions. She thought about background checks and Google searches that might turn up society page gossip about the Ashford divorce. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "You think you've won something. You haven't. I will make sure everyone knows what you are." Marina stared at the screen, her hands beginning to shake. She showed it to Diego, who frowned. "You should report that. That's harassment." "To who? The police? What will they do about a text message?" But she took a screenshot anyway, following Gerard's advice to document everything. Then she blocked the number, though she suspected it wouldn't be the last message. Victoria Ashford had drawn a line, and Marina, simply by existing in the wrong place at the wrong time, had ended up on the wrong side of it. The rest of her shift crawled by. Every time the door opened, Marina tensed, half expecting Victoria to storm in with attorneys and accusations. Every whispered conversation between diners felt like it was about her. She was developing the paranoia of someone whose private life had become public property without consent. At 7, her shift finally ended. She changed quickly and headed out to the parking lot, eager to get home, to lock the door, to pretend for a few hours that she lived in a world where powerful people couldn't just decide to make her life difficult on a whim. But as she approached her car, she stopped short. All 4 tires were flat. Marina stood there, staring, her exhausted mind trying to process this new violation. She walked around the car slowly, examining each tire. Not just flat, slashed. Clean cuts, deliberate destruction. She pulled out her phone to call. Who? The police? A tow truck? Her insurance, which probably didn't cover vandalism? "Miss Delgado?" She spun around. Marcus Ashford stood 10 feet away, emerging from a sleek black Tesla. He looked different from last night. No suit, just jeans and a casual button-down, his hair less styled. "Mr. Ashford?" She managed. "What are you doing here?" Hoping to apologize properly. Last night was chaotic. He noticed her staring at her car. "What happened?" "Someone slashed my tires." She sounded distant to her own ears. "All 4 of them." Marcus's jaw tightened. He walked over to examine the damage, crouching down to inspect the cuts. When he stood, his expression was grim. "This was Victoria, or someone she sent." "You don't know that." "I know my wife, ex-wife." He corrected himself with a bitter twist of his mouth. When Victoria feels wronged, she retaliates, and she always goes for maximum impact. He pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the police. This needs to be documented." "Mr. Ashford, I really don't think—" "Please, call me Marcus." His eyes met hers with genuine distress. "And I'm not asking, Miss Delgado. This is partly my fault. I should have anticipated this. I should have warned you." The police arrived 20 minutes later. 2 officers who looked barely interested in what they clearly considered a minor property crime. They took photos, wrote down information, and asked perfunctory questions. Marina could see the calculation happening in their eyes. The slashed tires of a beat-up Honda versus the presence of Marcus Ashford, one of the city's prominent businessmen. They became marginally more attentive when Marcus mentioned his ex-wife might be involved, but Marina could tell they weren't going to investigate with any real vigor. "We'll file a report," the younger officer said, handing Marina a card. "Contact your insurance. If we find any evidence linking this to a specific person, we'll be in touch." Translation: Don't hold your breath. After they left, Marina stood in the parking lot feeling untethered. It was after 8 now.
dark, and she was stranded with a vandalized car and a creeping sense that her life was spiraling into chaos through no fault of her own. "Let me give you a ride home," Marcus said. "That's really not necessary. Miss Delgado?" He held up a hand. "Marina, please. I dragged you into this mess. The least I can do is make sure you get home safely. And tomorrow, I'll have your tires replaced. Consider it an apology." Pride warred with practicality. Pride wanted to call a rideshare, to maintain her independence, to refuse anything from this man whose life had collided with hers like a meteor strike. Practicality noted that a rideshare would cost money she didn't have to spare, and that her insurance deductible was $500 she'd need time to gather. "Just a ride home," she said finally. "I'll handle the tires myself." Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but nodded instead. Just a ride home. His Tesla was absurdly luxurious compared to her Honda. Leather seats that adjusted at the touch of a button, a sound system that probably cost more than her monthly rent, that new car smell that seemed to represent everything she'd never have. Marina gave him her address and then sat in uncomfortable silence as he pulled out of the parking lot. "I really am sorry," Marcus said after a few blocks. "Not just about the tires, about all of it. Victoria's cruelty, the scene last night, the fact that you're now caught in the crossfire of a divorce that has nothing to do with you." "Why did you do it?" The question escaped before Marina could stop it. "Why make such a public spectacle? You could have served her papers privately, avoiding all this mess." Marcus was quiet for a moment, his hands steady on the steering wheel. Have you ever been in a relationship where you lose yourself piece by piece? When you wake up one day and realize the person you've become, the one who makes excuses, who looks away, who enables cruelty, isn't someone you recognize? Marina thought about her father, about how he'd shrunk himself to fit the factory's demands, how he'd swallowed his pride and his health until there was nothing left but a husk. "Yes," she said softly. "I've seen it." Victoria and I have been married for 5 years. The first year was, well, I thought it was love. She was charming, beautiful, and seemed to care about the same causes I did. But gradually, I started noticing things. The way she spoke to service staff, the casual racism disguised as concerns, the cruelty that she thought was humor. I told myself it was just stress, just her upbringing, just something we could work on together. Then I started hearing stories from my employees, from people at charity events, about how Victoria treated people when I wasn't around. And I realized I was complicit. Every time I stayed quiet, every time I made excuses, I was telling her that her behavior was acceptable. I was telling her victims that they didn't matter. So last night was... what? Penance? Last night was me finally choosing to be someone I could respect, even if it was messy, even if it hurt. He looked at me, and in the dim light from the street lamps, I could see the cost of that choice written on his face. "I won't ask you to forgive me for dragging you into this, but I want you to know that I'm going to do everything I can to protect you from the fallout." Marina felt something shift in her chest. Not attraction exactly, but recognition. The recognition of someone else who carried weight they hadn't asked for, who was trying to do right in a world that didn't always reward that effort. "I'm in the blue building," she pointed. "3rd floor." She got out of the car and stood on the sidewalk, watching as the Tesla pulled away, its red taillights disappearing into the night traffic. Then she climbed the 3 flights of stairs to her apartment. The elevator was broken again, and let herself into her small space. She locked the door, threw the deadbolt, and stood with her back against it, finally allowing herself to feel the full weight of the day. Her phone buzzed, another unknown number. Against her better judgment, she opened the message.
Enjoy his charity while it lasts. Homewreckers always end up alone. Marina blocked the number and tossed her phone on the bed. She wanted to cry, to scream, to throw something. But instead, she just stood there, feeling hollow. This morning, she'd been worried about cataloging books correctly. Tonight, she was being called a homewrecker and dealing with vandalized property. She made tea, chamomile, her mother's remedy for everything, and sat at her tiny kitchen table with one of her beloved books, trying to lose herself in someone else's words. But even Toni Morrison's prose couldn't quite transport her tonight. She kept reading the same page over and over, the words refusing to form meaning. At 11, her phone rang. Isabella's name flashed on the screen. "Hey sis," Marina answered, trying to sound normal. "Don't hey sis me. Mama called. She said something happened at work and you wouldn't talk about it. What's going on?" Marina closed her eyes. She should have known Rosa would rally the troops. "It's complicated." "Then uncomplicated. I've got 20 minutes before I have to get back to the floor." So Marina told her the whole story. From Victoria's initial cruelty, to the divorce announcement, to the slashed tires and threatening texts. Marina listened without interrupting, a skill she'd developed as a nurse, letting patients tell their stories at their own pace. When Marina finished, Isabella was quiet for a moment. Then, "You need to come stay with me." "What?" "No, I'm fine." "You're getting threatening texts, and your car was vandalized. That's not fine." Isabella's voice had taken on the tone the Marina recognized from childhood, the voice that meant her little sister had made a decision and would not be swayed. "I'm serious, Mar. Pack a bag and take a rideshare to my place, tonight." "I can't just—" "Yes, you can. My couch is comfortable, you'll be safe. And frankly, I'll sleep better knowing you're not alone in that apartment where the locks are probably 50 years old." She paused. "Please, Marina, for me." Marina looked around her small apartment, her books, her diploma, her carefully constructed life that suddenly felt as fragile as tissue paper. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay, give me an hour to pack. I'll be home by midnight. We'll talk more then. And Marina, we're going to figure this out. You're not alone in this." After they hung up, Marina pulled out a duffel bag and began packing essentials. Clothes for a few days, toiletries, her laptop, a few books she couldn't bear to be without. As she moved through the familiar space, she felt a strange sense of dislocation, as if she were watching herself from outside her body. 3 days ago, her life had been ordinary. Struggling, yes, but ordinary. Now she was fleeing to her sister's apartment like a refugee from her own existence. She thought about what Marcus had said. Have you ever been in a relationship where you lose yourself piece by piece? She wasn't in a relationship with Victoria Ashford, had never even spoken to the woman before last night. But somehow Victoria had reached into Marina's life and begun taking pieces anyway. Her sense of safety, her peace of mind, her belief that hard work and good intentions could protect you from malice. The rideshare arrived at 11:47. Marina took one last look at her apartment, her sanctuary, her refuge, and wondered when she'd feel safe enough to return. She locked the door and headed down the stairs, duffel bag over her shoulder, leaving behind a life that had been disrupted by forces she couldn't control and didn't understand. Isabella's apartment was in a marginally better neighborhood, a one-bedroom that she decorated with the cheerful clutter of someone who worked too much to worry about interior design. When Marina arrived, Isabella was already home, still in her scrubs, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked like their mother, same small frame, same determined chin, but where Rosa's face showed the weight of 70 years, Isabella still held the remnants of youth, although exhaustion was starting to etch permanent lines around her eyes. "Hey," Isabella said, pulling Marina into a hug. "You look like hell." "Feel like it too. Marina dropped her duffel bag and collapsed on the couch. When did life get so complicated?
When you accidentally became the catalyst for a billionaire's divorce. Isabella disappeared into the kitchen and returned with 2 glasses of wine. Here, medicinal purposes. They sat together in companionable silence, sipping wine that was probably too cheap to be medicinal, but felt necessary anyway. The apartment was quiet, except for the distant sound of traffic and the hum of the refrigerator. Marina felt some of the tension begin to drain from her shoulders. "So, what's the plan?" Isabella asked finally. "I don't know. Go to work, hope this blows over, pray that Victoria gets bored and finds someone else to torment." "That's not a plan. That's hope. Hope is not a strategy." Isabella set down her wine glass. "You need to be proactive. Document everything, like Gerard said. Use that fancy lawyer Marcus gave you. And maybe consider that this situation, as awful as it is, might also be an opportunity." Marina laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "An opportunity is I'm being harassed by a billionaire's ex-wife. My car was vandalized. I'm getting death threats. What part of that is an opportunity?" "The part where Marcus Ashford feels guilty enough to help you. The part where you've been handed connections to people and resources you'd never have access to otherwise. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying you asked for this. But you're in it now, and you can either be a victim or you can be strategic. Which one helps you more?" Marina wanted to argue, wanted to insist that accepting help from Marcus was somehow wrong, somehow tainted. But she thought about her mother's medications, about her own student loans, about the precariousness of a life where 4-slash tires could destabilize everything. "I don't want to use him," she said quietly. "I'm not talking about using anyone. I'm talking about accepting help when it's offered, especially when the person offering it is partly responsible for your situation." Isabella leaned forward. "Mar, you've spent your whole life being noble, working 2 jobs to put me through nursing school, taking care of Mama, settling for a waitressing job instead of fighting for the teaching positions you deserve. Maybe it's time to let someone else carry some of the weight." The words hit harder than Marina expected. She had spent her life being noble, had worn her self-sufficiency like armor, but the armor was heavy, and she was tired. "I'll think about it," she said finally. They talked for another hour, about their mother, about Isabella's latest terrible date with a doctor who'd spent the entire dinner talking about his cryptocurrency investments, and about anything except Victoria Ashford and destroyed tires and threatening texts. By the time Marina unfolded the sofa bed and crawled under the blankets, it was after 2 a.m. But sleep didn't come easily. She lay in the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of Isabella's apartment, and her mind churned through possibilities and fears. What if Victoria's campaign of harassment escalated? What if she lost her job? What if this followed her forever, a scarlet letter in the form of society page gossip? And beneath all those fears ran another thread, one she barely wanted to acknowledge. What if Isabella was right? What if this terrible situation could somehow be transformed into something else? Not opportunity exactly. That felt too mercenary. But perhaps a catalyst for change she'd been too afraid to pursue on her own. Her phone, sitting on the coffee table, lit up with another message. Marina's heart sank. But when she checked, it wasn't a threat. It was from Marcus. "Spoke to my security team. They'll be monitoring your building and your car remotely. Also arranged for new tires to be installed tomorrow. Please don't argue, it's done. You should be able to drive safely by evening. Sleep well if you can." Marina stared at the message, unsure how to feel about this level of intervention in her life. She settled for a simple reply. "Thank you." His response came immediately, as if he'd been waiting.
It's the least I can do, literally. If you need anything else, please don't hesitate. You didn't ask for any of this." She put the phone face down and closed her eyes, willing sleep to come. In the morning, she would have to face whatever came next. But for now, in her sister's apartment, with security she didn't ask for watching over a car she couldn't drive, Marina Delgado let herself rest. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm. And somewhere in that same city, Victoria Ashford was likely planning her next move, sharpening her knives, preparing for a war that Marina had never wanted to fight. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, lying there in the dark, Marina felt something unexpected, a spark of anger. Not the hot rage that burns quick and dies fast, but the slow-burning kind that transforms coal into diamond. She had spent her life being invisible, being careful, being grateful for whatever scraps life offered. Maybe it was time to be something else. Maybe it was time to stop disappearing. Friday morning arrived with gray skies and the threat of rain. Marina woke on Isabella's couch, feeling disoriented, her neck stiff from the unfamiliar pillow. Her sister had already left for her shift. A note on the coffee table read, "Bagels in kitchen, coffee made, you've got this," with a hastily drawn heart. Marina allowed herself a small smile before the weight of her situation settled back onto her shoulders. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from Gerard in a text. "Need to talk before your shift. Can you come in early, around 2?" Marina's stomach nodded. She texted back an affirmative and went through the mechanical motions of her morning routine. The shower in Isabella's bathroom had better water pressure than hers, but she couldn't enjoy it. Her mind was already spinning through possibilities, each one darker than the last. Was Gerard going to fire her after all? Had Victoria escalated her threats? Had something else happened that she didn't even know about yet? By noon, she was back at her own apartment to change into her work clothes. The building seemed different in daylight. Or perhaps she was different, newly aware of how vulnerable she was. Every neighbor she passed in the hallway made her tense. Every sound behind her made her turn. She grabbed her Constellation uniform and left quickly, feeling like an intruder in her own home. Her Honda was still in the restaurant parking lot where she'd left it, but true to Marcus's word, it now sat on 4 new tires. They were better than the originals, some expensive brand she didn't recognize. A note was tucked under the windshield wiper. "Drive safely, M." The simple gesture, the care behind it, made her throat tight. She'd spent so long managing on her own, making do with inadequate solutions to persistent problems, that having someone simply fix something, no questions, no expectations, felt foreign and slightly uncomfortable. Gerard was waiting in his office when she arrived at 2. His normally composed expression showed cracks of stress. His tie was slightly loosened, his hair less perfectly styled than usual. "Close the door," he said, gesturing to the chair across from its desk. Marina sat, folding her hands in her lap to hide their trembling. "What's happened?" Victoria Ashford's attorney sent a formal letter to the restaurant's ownership. They're threatening a lawsuit for, and I'm reading directly here, maintaining a hostile environment that facilitated the breakdown of the Ashford marriage through employment of individuals of questionable moral character. Gerard's voice dripped with disgust. "It's complete garbage legally, according to our attorney, but it's also expensive garbage to deal with." "Are they asking for me to be fired?" "Among other things, they want you terminated, they want a public apology from the restaurant, and they want access to all our employee records for the past 5 years. Gerard tossed the letter onto his desk. "The owners are considering just paying her off to make it go away." Marina's vision swam. "Paying her off? It's not what I want. It's not what's right. But it's business, Marina. Fighting this could cost tens of thousands in legal fees, and the negative publicity could hurt revenue. Victoria knows that. She's weaponizing it." He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. "I'm fighting for you. I want you to know that.
But I also want you to be prepared. The owners might decide it's easier to cut their losses. Meaning me. I'm the loss to be cut? I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Marina stood, her legs feeling unsteady. When will they decide? Next week, probably. Maybe sooner. Gerard stood as well, coming around the desk. Marina, listen to me. If they let you go, it's wrongful termination. You'll have a case. That attorney Marcus gave you, use him. Sue us if you have to. Get something out of this nightmare. The fact that Gerard was essentially encouraging her to sue his own employer would have been funny if the situation weren't so bleak. Marina nodded numbly and left the office. Monday morning arrived with the inevitability of a funeral. Marina dressed carefully, professional but not trying too hard, a navy dress that was appropriate without being memorable. Isabella drove her to Constellation, squeezing her hand before she got out of the car. Whatever happens in there, you're not alone. Remember that. The restaurant was closed for the morning meeting. Gerard was already in the small private dining room they used for events, along with two people Marina didn't recognize. A man and woman in expensive suits that had attorney written all over them. And sitting at the far end of the table, to Marina's shock, was Marcus Ashford. What are you doing here? She asked before she could stop herself. I'm a major investor in the restaurant group. Have been for 3 years. The owners thought my presence might be helpful in resolving this situation.
The female attorney, she introduced herself as Patricia Wong, gestured for Marina to sit. Ms. Delgado, we've called this meeting to discuss the allegations made by Victoria Ashford's legal team and to determine the best path forward for all parties. Marina sat, folding her hands on the table to hide their shaking. Am I being fired? That depends, the male attorney, Robert Chen, said. We need to understand your relationship with Mr. Ashford. Have you had any personal interactions beyond standard customer service? He gave me a ride home Friday night after my tires were slashed, Marina said steadily. Before that, no. I served him dinner once 6 months ago, then again last Wednesday when he confronted his wife here. That's it. Patricia made notes on her tablet. No phone calls, text messages, private meetings? None. Until Friday, I didn't even know his full name. Marcus leaned forward. I'd like to submit something to the record. He slid a folder across the table to Patricia. Security footage from the restaurant, timestamped. Every interaction Ms. Delgado and I have had in this establishment. You'll see they're entirely professional. Also included, documentation of Victoria's harassment, the private investigator she hired to follow Ms. Delgado, and evidence of 2 prior cases where Victoria used similar tactics against service workers who displeased her. Robert opened the folder, scanning the contents. His eyebrows rose. These settlements were paid quietly to make problems disappear, Marcus finished. This is Victoria's pattern. She identifies someone vulnerable, manufactures a crisis, then uses legal pressure to destroy them. The difference this time is that Ms. Delgado has resources to fight back. Resources I'm providing, yes, but that doesn't change the validity of her position. Gerard spoke up. I've worked with Marina for 2 years. Her conduct has been exemplary. Firing her would be admitting to something that never happened. It would be cowardice. Patricia and Robert exchanged glances, some silent communication passing between them. Patricia turned to Marina. Ms. Delgado, Mrs. Ashford's attorney has indicated they might be willing to drop the lawsuit if you resign voluntarily and sign an NDA. You'd receive a settlement, enough to live on for several months while you find other employment. In exchange for what? Marina asked, though she already knew. Your silence. You couldn't discuss any aspect of this situation publicly. You couldn't work in any establishment owned by this restaurant group, and you'd have to leave the city. There it was. The price of peace. Disappear. Be erased. Let Victoria win completely. Marina thought of her mother's words. When you fight, you lose it on your own terms. She thought of her father, swallowing his dignity at that factory, the shame that had eaten at him. She thought of all the times she'd made herself smaller, quieter, less visible, trying to fit into spaces that rejected her. "No," she said. Robert blinked. "Ms. Delgado, I'd encourage you to consider—" "No!" Marina's voice was stronger now. "I'm not signing anything. I'm not leaving. I didn't do anything wrong, and I won't be punished as if I did. If Mrs. Ashford wants to sue the restaurant, let her. If she wants to sue me personally, let her do that too. But I'm not going to help her write a story where I'm the villain." Marcus's expression shifted, something like pride or recognition. "The restaurant will cover your legal fees," he said to Marina. "All of them. And I'll make sure the owners understand that letting you go would be both legally and ethically wrong." Patricia closed her folder. "Then we're going to trial. You understand that, Ms. Delgado. This will be public, potentially ugly. Your name will be in the news. Victoria's team will try to destroy your credibility. They're already doing that. At least this way, I get to defend myself." The meeting ended shortly after that. As Marina left the dining room, Marcus caught up with her in the hallway. "That was brave," he said quietly. "It was necessary. There's a difference. Sometimes they're the same thing." He handed her a business card, not his own, but someone else's. "That's my publicist. If you want to tell your side of the story, she can help. The blog post, the media attention, you don't have to let Victoria control the narrative." Marina looked at the card, then at Marcus. "Why are you doing this, really?" He was quiet for a moment. "Because I've spent years watching Victoria hurt people and never facing consequences. Because I was complicit in that through my silence. And because you deserve better than to be collateral damage in my failed marriage. I don't need rescuing. I know. But you deserve allies. There's a difference there, too."
He left before she could respond. Marina stood in the empty hallway, the publicist's card in her hand, feeling something shift inside her. Not hope exactly. The situation was still dire, still dangerous. But something harder, more resilient. Determination. That evening, she called the publicist. Her name was Andrea Liu, and she listened to Marina's story without interrupting. When Marina finished, Andrea was quiet for a moment. "This is going to be difficult," she said finally. "Victoria has connections, money, a sympathetic narrative. But you have something she doesn't. Truth. And if we're strategic, if we're careful, truth can be louder than money. What do I need to do?" "Tell your story, on your terms. I'll arrange interviews with legitimate journalists, people who will actually listen, not just print Victoria's version. We'll need to be smart about timing, about which outlets we approach first. But Marina, you're going to have to be visible. You're going to have to stop hiding." Stop hiding. Marina had been hiding in plain sight for years, performing invisibility as a survival strategy. The thought of deliberately making herself seen, vulnerable, exposed, was terrifying. But maybe that was the point. Maybe that was the only way forward. "Okay," Marina said. "Let's do it." 2 days later, a major news outlet published an article. "The Hidden Cost of Divorce: How Victoria Ashford's Legal Strategy Targets Working Women." Marina's name was in it, her story, her evidence. The security footage, the harassment, the pattern of her prior settlements, all of it laid out with journalistic precision. The response was immediate. Social media erupted. Some supported Victoria, calling Marina a homewrecker and worse. But others saw the truth. A powerful woman using the legal system as a weapon against someone who couldn't fight back. The narrative began to shift. Victoria's attorney called for an emergency meeting. By the end of the week, they dropped the lawsuit against the restaurant entirely. The public scrutiny had become too intense. Social media had turned Victoria into a symbol of entitled cruelty, and her own reputation was crumbling faster than Marina's ever could. Within 2 weeks, Victoria quietly withdrew her personal threats as well, accepting a divorce settlement far less generous than she'd anticipated. Marcus's documentation of her prior harassment cases had made her legal position untenable. Marina kept her job at Constellation, though she worked there only another 6 months. The publicity had brought unexpected opportunities, A small teaching position at a community college, adjunct work that wasn't what she dreamed of, but it was a start. She took it. The lawsuit threat had one unintended consequence. It had made her visible. Several education advocacy groups reached out, wanting her to speak about barriers facing overqualified service workers. She declined most interviews, but accepted a few. Her voice, it turned out, mattered to people who'd felt equally invisible. 3 months after the media storm died down, she ran into Marcus at a bookstore. They had coffee, just two people whose lives had collided catastrophically and somehow survived it. He told her he was dating again, carefully, learning to trust his judgment. She told him about her teaching position. They parted as something like friends, bound by the strange intimacy of having witnessed each other's worst moments. Marina kept her apartment, she kept her dignity, and she kept the scars, the hypervigilance, the awareness that safety was always conditional, always contingent on the mercy of those with more power. She'd won this battle, but the war between the powerful and the vulnerable was endless, fought in restaurants and courtrooms and quiet moments where people decided who mattered and who didn't.